You're listening to the My Thoughts, His Words podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Auerbach, and I'm joined by my friend Olia Denisuk, and we want you to join us each week as we study the Bible and share our thoughts. Let's go. Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm super excited about the wedding I'll have the next week. So,
Nice.
obviously, my thoughts are most about this event, but it's good to meet again and to talk about the Word of God and what He says about us.
Do you sleep good when you're excited, or do you like stay up all night? Like if you have an event or something the next day?
Yeah. Well, I think it's like almost a week till the wedding, so I'm not
Yeah.
that super excited yet, but I think I hope that I will sleep normally the
Yeah,
night
yeah,
before
I
the
know.
wedding.
That's always what I want. Like, I always want to sleep through the night, but like, even if we are flying somewhere and I have
Mhm.
to get over this because like it's just so terrible, but I'll be like wide awake. Like, if we have to fly somewhere in the morning, I'm constantly thinking, like, I've set an alarm, but I'm thinking, like, oh,
Mhm.
I have to be on time. And so I'll be like wide awake at like 2 a.m., just staring at the ceiling. But yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully you'll get a good night's sleep before your wedding. It won't be like too excited to sleep.
yeah. And what's up with you? How it's been?
It's been good. I'm gonna be honest. Like all week, I was trying to think of a topic. Usually, I feel like I have like a direction or a topic that I want to go in with the podcast, and all week I just couldn't get away from this passage that we're gonna read today, Proverbs 31. It's the famous description of what it means um, to be like a wife of noble characters. The way King Lemuel describes it, it's the teachings of his mother. She was telling him like, this is what you want to look for in a wife. And I wanted to get away from it so bad, but then I thought, you know what? You're about to get married. This is like the perfect thing to talk about. And
Well,
I've never even talked to your fiance, Makola, but I know he would like 1,000,000% agree with me, or just, agree that he's found a wife of noble character. So it is actually the perfect thing. I think sometimes you can feel almost like you're unqualified, or not even unqualified, but like you're like, oh, I don't know if I should talk about that, or I don't know. It was one of those things I just didn't want to talk about. But it's going to be awesome. So we're going to read in Proverbs 31, and also I just want to talk a little bit about men and women in general, and just what a blessing and a gift it is that God's made us so uniquely different and yet so complementary to each other. So I think it'll be good.
yeah, let's talk about it.
Do you want to start us off in Proverbs 31, verse 10?
Sure. So, a wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and work with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously, and her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle. I hope I pronounced that well with her
Yeah, yeah.
fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Oh, that's a lot, and that's very good.
Yeah, like what are your first thoughts when you read that?
Well, I remember the scene from The Chosen. I guess some multiple scenes, not just one, when men say about a woman who prepared a Sabbath dinner, a woman of valor who can find, and even Jesus said it in the scene. So I like that
Oh,
because
I didn't even catch that. That's crazy. I don't remember that at all in The Chosen. That's cool.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to
it's
listen for it.
in the season one, I believe.
Okay.
Every time they prepare the Sabbath um, supper dinner, they said that, and it's also um, good to just discover and explore how women and how people and all lived at that times, because the life was way harder than we have now. I guess because we live in the civilized world. uh, I don't know if I say
No,
this
yeah,
right.
that's correct. That's a correct pronunciation.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I
okay.
think we've just developed so much as far as like manufacturing and producing goods that, it says in the one verse, it says that in her hand she holds the distaff, and I didn't even know what that was, but it's
Mhm.
something used to spin wool on. And
Yeah,
that was necessary. If you didn't have a woman or someone making your clothes, like how would you be clothed? So it was so necessary back then for someone, and even now today, this is something totally kind of off topic, but something that a lot of people don't realize is all clothes are still handmade. Every single clothing item is still done by hand. We still haven't gotten machines. We use a sewing machine, but it's still hand sewn with a person. We haven't gotten like robots to make clothes yet. And so, when you think about buying clothing, sometimes it's nice if you're able to consider where you get your clothing from. Make sure it's ethical, make sure the people making it are being paid well and they're not being, like given pennies for these, the work that they're doing.
yeah.
So, and I mean, that's something I haven't even thought about until recently, but just thinking about it, it's like, wow, back then every woman probably was well versed in like sewing and making clothes for their family.
Actually, my grandma was sewing and making clothes for the whole family. They lived on the eastern side of Ukraine, and they just didn't have resource to get the clothes from. So she was knitting clothes, and she's still doing that, blankets and everything for the house.
I
So
hadn't even I hadn't even thought about this, but my grandmother grew up very poor and she would sew her own clothes and she would sew clothes for her sister. And even once she had money, she would make me dresses when I was little. And that's where I learned how to sew. That's where my love for
mm,
sewing like first came in. When I was a kid, my grandma like let me pick out what do you want to make, and she helped me make it. So that's really cool. Grandmas are awesome.
for sure. Um, mm, So I read a little bit about the life of a woman back in the days of Jesus,
Mhm.
and it was it wasn't super complex, but it was still hard. They had to make bread daily and buy the flour or make their own in the um, thresholds and the um, well the all the machines that were used to make a flour, and
Mhm.
it was all
They're, like,
hand
grinding
grinding.
the wheat kernels and yeah. And they
Yeah.
were probably actually grinding it like with a stone or something, you know. Now we have like these mills you can crank,
Mhm.
or like an electric mill that you would plug in and grind the wheat kernels, but they're probably using a stone. Like it was probably actually pretty tough work to get the
Yeah.
flour ground down.
And actually, here it says that her arms are strong to do the house
Yeah.
work, and it was necessary. So, yeah, she had to make a bread for the breakfast, and they usually ate it with some goat cheese or maybe some fruit that was seasonal. And then she had to wash clothes, um, clear the house, and keep the fire, and many other things. So um, yeah, it wasn't an easy life, and
It was
Jesus
very, very
elevated.
necessary too.
Yeah, Jesus elevated to the life of and value of women, and I think you'll tell more about this.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought, so I just read this personally, and I haven't read Proverbs 31 in a while, and I just went back to it personally this week and read it. And that's when I was still trying to think of something different to talk about on the podcast, and I couldn't, and I was just like stuck on this Proverbs 31. But honestly, my first thoughts were like, this woman's a boss. Like, she sounds awesome. She's like literally doing it all. It says she considers a field and buys it. Like, she has her own money to plant a vineyard. She's taking care of her family. She's also working. She's strong. And one thing I just want to kind of mention and stress, is just like how much honor and dignity the Bible gives to women, like you just mentioned. Like, and I've heard people like be accusatory towards like Christianity and the Bible when it comes to women, but I mean that couldn't be further from the truth. And it's not just to women of certain status, is what I love. When I was thinking about this, I was like, who in the Bible does who does the Bible highlight that's a woman? And the first few people that came to mind, the very first one was Rahab, who hid the spies. She hid the Israeli spies. And she's one of the heroes in the Bible. She was a prostitute. And in our society, those are people would think of a prostitute as someone as less than or lowly. And it's like the Bible literally shows what she did as being, it was righteous. And the Bible elevates her. And it's not that prostitution is good, but the Bible, paints her as a hero. And she was actually in Jesus's lineage. The first people to witness the resurrection were women. Jesus appears to them first and tells them to go tell the other disciples, and then the other people, I'm trying to see like just what I wrote down, because I just wrote down the first few that came to mind. And then like the first woman that Jesus makes himself known to as the Messiah is the woman at the well. And then not to mention he's born through Mary, right? Like a very humble young girl. And so the Bible just all throughout it, and there's so many more. Those were just the first few that I thought of, but all throughout it, women are elevated, esteemed, respected. I love this part that says that she has wisdom. I'm trying to remember which verse it is. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. And so it's just like, she's not empty-headed. She's smart. She has something to say. She's not told to keep quiet. And so I don't know. I've heard people talk about Christianity as if it's so oppressive, or they refer to this patriarchy or this idea of patriarchy with like expletives, and it's just something that's really disdained. But I looked up the word patriarchy, and the first thing that I saw, I wanted to just see the literal translation of it, and it literally translates from the Greek. It means the rule of the father. And I thought, wow, the rule of the father, like, who is our father? Our father is God. And when men and women both live under God's rule, like, we live in perfect harmony. Like, there is no like unfairness or taking advantage of anything. And so we're all subject, men and women are all subject to God's rule, and we live in a fallen world, so that hasn't always happened, you know, but when men and women choose to submit to God's ruling, I just think it's such a beautiful thing, and I think it's really a gift, and God gives us clear instructions for both men and women. So um, I think historically and currently, where women are mistreated or are being mistreated, it's just because of man's abuse of their strength. It's not the way God ordained it, and I think most people would agree with that. But um, I want to read First Peter 3:7, and then we'll go to Ephesians. So in First Peter 3:7, husbands, it says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And I love that because an heir means that you're legally entitled to property or rank, right? And so it says, you know, treat them with respect as the weaker partner. We are physically weaker, you know, like men should. I think it's beautiful. Men should care for women. They should acknowledge that they're physically weaker. I love like playing any kind of game. Like if people are like, I remember playing pickup games of soccer when I was younger. Wasn't very good at it, but I would play with guys and girls. And I would always play, like if my brother was in like a touch football game or something, I would play football with them. And I remember like the guys that would acknowledge me as weaker, you could tell because they weren't going to give it their full force when they two-hand touched me, you know, like they weren't going to tackle me, throw me to the ground. Like I love it that they acknowledge that. There were some guys that I have played with, and it's like the risk you run when you want to play a game like that with a bunch of guys, that they didn't acknowledge that. And, you know, I felt like I got like clonked in the head or something, you know? And it's something, you know, it's a beautiful thing for men and women to acknowledge the differences, acknowledge that women are physically weaker, men are physically stronger. um, and there are some very, very strong women. It doesn't take anything away from women, but it's just men are meant to protect, they're meant to care for, they're meant to lead. And so I think it's a good thing. And we're all heirs with Christ, you know? And that's what it says. It says we're co-heirs with Christ, and that we should, I lost my spot, but they should acknowledge us as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So when it says nothing will hinder your prayers, I think like, wow, God really takes that seriously. Like, um, you know, that we should be treated with respect so that nothing will hinder um, their prayers, is what it says. So I don't know. I think it's good.
Yes, like, well, everything in the Bible is good,
Yeah,
especially when it comes to marriage, because marriage is beautiful. I think
yeah,
created by God.
yeah. What else did I have? I had Ephesians. Um, so this is the verse on submission. I kind of started talking about it, but Ephesians 5:22 through 32. Do you want to read
Right.
that one?
Yeah. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Um, to 24?
Yeah, to 22 through 32.
Oh, the 30. Okay. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband.
Yeah, that's so good. I love how it talks about Christ in the church. You know, we're the bride of Christ, and I just love how all of it is all connected. But you know, I think this is where a lot of women feel the pushback with the submission. They feel like that word is a bad thing, but like I said earlier when I kind of started talking about it, is I just feel like there's safety in submission. And I will say, like, you know, we're called to submit to our husbands. You know, when you're a daughter and you have a godly father, you submit to your father before you're married. In dating, you are not called to submit to your boyfriend. So if you're listening and you're dating, you're in a bad relationship, like just get the heck out of that relationship. Like you're not called to submit to that man, you know? And and even in marriage, God does give reason. You know, he does say, you know, if a man will not live peaceably with his wife, and so if there is abuse, you know, it is not that Christians, and this is where I feel like Christianity has gotten the bad rap, is where women feel like they were supposed to submit to something that was truly abusive or truly wrong. And that is never God's intention. God's intention is for this to be so done so well that it's such an example to the world of God's love for the church, and you know, our love for Christ. And so but I mean, as a woman, I think it's important for us to respect men, for us to respect our husbands specifically. But there is a lot of like anti-man rhetoric in America. Like there is a lot of
Mm.
hateful, like a lot of women very disdaining, like what they actually say, the thing that they say, like when I said they use the word patriarchy with a lot of expletives, the thing that they chant is they chant F the patriarchy. That is the chant. Like they hate, and they're saying like we hate being under men. Like we will not be oppressed by
Mm.
men. We will not submit to men. You can't tell me what to do. And that is what is swept through our society and is also destroying our society. You know, it's gonna cause a crumble if that's the way women stay. If they stay in this manner that is like so hateful towards men,
Mm.
instead of building them up, instead of respecting them. You know, yeah, we can acknowledge that men have sometimes abused their power. There have been some very wicked things done at the hands of men towards women, towards anyone that has been weaker than. But that is not the way God designed it. And we are called to build men up. We are called to encourage them, and we are called to submit to our husbands. And there is safety in that submission. And I think, you know, like I read, like the Bible is so pro women. It's so pro men too. It's pro all of creation. We are all made in God's likeness, right? And so as a woman, like I just want to say I'm so thankful for men. I'm so thankful for good men. I'm so thankful for godly men. We need them in our society. And um yeah, I don't know. I just feel like as a whole society has been, you know, we're kind of being taught to tear men down, and there's this whole thing of toxic masculinity, and it gets thrown around a lot. People will say like, "Oh, more toxic masculinity," or "We don't need any more of that toxic masculinity." And they'll tell it to men, and it I feel like in a way like it makes some men like afraid to even speak up for what they believe, because it's like they're too afraid of like being considered hateful, or they're too afraid of being considered too rough or whatever. But we need men who will speak up, and like true strong men that are brave and courageous and willing to fight for what is good, to protect, to lead, you know, the way God ordained it to be. And we need women that are willing to also be strong and courageous and speak up and fight for what is good. But also we need women to remember like that marriage is good, marriage is godly, and submitting to a man is a good thing. And so those were just kind of my thoughts on it. I guess the different like circles that I've been in, maybe I've heard more of it than, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it's like in Ukraine necessarily, or like how the family structure is, or like how the family structure is spoken of in Ukraine from like a worldly perspective. But I guess here, from a worldly perspective, I've heard a lot of like hatred or like just animosity. I shouldn't say hatred necessarily, but like animosity towards the patriarchy or towards men. But all I can think is that the rule of Father God is a good thing. And so
When we both are under the rule of Father, everything is gonna be well then and
yeah,
balanced. So
absolutely. And
I felt like we in Ukraine don't really come to this. Well, what I feel at least is that we have pretty well balanced families, and there is no feminist movements. Maybe somewhere, but I don't really feel the impact of that, or we don't have news about that. Well, everything now is about the war, so um,
you guys
I,
are, I mean, like, I would imagine when war hits, you cling to your family, you cling to each other.
yeah,
There is no disdain for the men who are going out to defend the country. You know,
yeah, and we all
they're
respect.
heroes.
Yes,
They're heroes, and they deserve the utmost respect. And that's really important. I love it that you said that, because that's what I feel like we've forgotten in America. And I think I know why I did not want to talk about this. And it's because there were so many things I felt like can get misconstrued. And I feel like sometimes when you talk about something like this, no matter which way you hit it from one angle of wives submit to your husbands. And you have so many people that are like, whoa, she's just that kind of like submissive person, or, it gets painted in the negative picture. Or you hit it from the angle of, yes, there have been times where this has been really whacked out, and there have been people that have been claiming like, oh, I'm godly and you should submit, and they haven't been godly, they haven't had the fruit of the Spirit, they haven't been gentle, it's been abused, that authority has been abused. And then you say it from that perspective, and then you have a bunch of people saying like, oh, well, she's not a godly woman, she's not a submissive woman. So it feels like it's one of those things where it's like you literally can't win either way if you talk about it. But I hope the Bible came through. I hope the verses that we read came through, and I hope people will just listen, and they'll read their Bibles, and they'll see the way God ordained it and designed it, and they'll see how beautiful that design is. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like the video and hit that little bell to be notified of future podcast episodes. Thanks for listening.